Hello everyone out there, my name is Robert Greene. Stop looking at all the bullshit. Stop looking at what people say, about what people pretend to be, and look at their actions, and look at what their actions lead to. And that is the effective truth of who they are, and the effective truth of what they're trying to accomplish. I wanted to talk about a few things today. The first subject I wanted to cover is something that kind of fascinates me. My first book, The 48 Laws of Power, the famous Florentine writer Niccolo Machiavelli was sort of the main inspiration for it. And Machiavelli has a concept that I've always been extremely enamored of. It's called effective truth. And what that means is, in daily social life, people surround themselves with a lot of fog. We never really know what they're up to. We tend to judge people based on their appearances. They say, the justifications they give for their actions. And Machiavelli said, stop looking at all the bullshit. Stop looking at what people say, about what people pretend to be, and look at their actions, and look at what their actions lead to. And that is the effective truth of who they are, and the effective truth of what they're trying to accomplish. And the classic example that he gives, which sort of illustrates the power of Machiavelli's thought, was of the Pope, the Catholic Pope at the time, who was a Borgia. The Pope talks a lot about morality and all these important issues in the church. So the Catholic Church is really about accumulating power and wealth, and that is the effective truth of who they are, which was an incredibly revolutionary statement at the time. So I like to use the concept of effective truth in my daily life, in judging people, in judging their level of power, in judging their intentions, and in judging their character. So I want to go a little bit into each of those ideas. The first thing is, whenever a group of people are organized in some fashion in a company or wherever, there are power dynamics. And there's generally one person, a man or a woman, on top who has the most power. But it's not always what you think it is. Sometimes the people behind the scenes, sometimes the people who are not so loud, are the ones who really are controlling the dynamic in a situation. I remember when I worked in Hollywood, for instance, and all the attention was on the director, as if he, in this case it was a man, was the one that was creating this quote-unquote work of art. But when I looked at it and I saw the situation, it was clearly the people who controlled the money who had the power. It was the producers and the financiers who ultimately decided this is what the movie should be about, this is what the ending should be like, this is how it should be edited. So instead of getting caught up in the glamour and glitz of Hollywood, I saw that you have to follow the money. As they used to say in French, cherchez la femme, look for the woman in a crime to see what was the source of the crime. I always like cherchez l'argent, look for the money, who controls the purse strings. That is where true power lies. Oftentimes, so for instance, in social media, somebody will be a quote unquote influencer with lots of attention, lots of likes, lots of people, promoting them, etc. And they seem to be powerful, but the truth is they have to continually play to the audience. They have to be very clowny. They have to be very outrageous. They have to do lots of things to get people attention. They're not creating trends. They're not creating fads. They're actually following people. They're following what's going on in the world right now and trying to glom onto that as a source of power. So in situations like that, I always tell myself, they're not the ones who have power. It's actually the public that has the power that's kind of directing them to do what they have to do. And so a classic example of this for me, because often you see this in politics, is you look at somebody like a Vladimir Putin, who would appear to be an extremely powerful person, and he is, seemingly having absolute power. But if you dissect this through the lens of effective truth and you train yourself to analyze things through this lens, you see that his power is not at all absolute. He's terrified of the Russian public. He's terrified of any kind of dissent or any kind of revolution, which is sort of what motivates a lot of his behavior. So he was terrified of the revolutions that were going on in the Arab countries in the early 2010s. It caused him to clamp down on what's going on in Russia. He's terrified of the example of Ukraine, which caused him to now, he doesn't want this as an example for Russians. Soloviki, the people of power in Russia, the oligarchs, etc. He's actually very insecure. His power is very tenuous, right? And it could turn on a dime if something goes wrong. Oftentimes in politics or in business, you look for who has the money as the source of power, and you look if people are really in control or if they're really beholden to the public, to public opinion, and have to kind of play that game and play up to what people think about them. The other thing about effective truth is it will tell you what people's true intentions are. I remember I was working at a company, working with the CEO of a very large company. He was continually firing people in certain positions of power. And he would always explain it as they weren't up to the job, they were inadequate, they were incompetent. So the idea behind the effective truth is to always look at people's actions, not their words, not how they justify themselves, but the patterns of their behavior. And using that knowledge, using those kind of patterns that you see to actually decipher how powerful they are, what their true intentions are, and the nature of their character. And I often find that people who are the most kind of moralistic, who preach the most, who try to pretend that what they're really about is righteousness, about justice and fairness. But then you notice that slowly and slowly they're accumulating more and more power. That the use of morality is actually a front, accumulating power. This is the way to deceive and distract people. So you want to train yourself to continually look at what they actually do and not at their words, not how they justify themselves. The final thing is about their character, which is really important if ever you have to hire somebody as an assistant or a business partner. And once again, people throw a lot of fog out there. They pretend they're very charming when you meet them. Their resume looks impressive. They say all the right things. And then lo and behold, when they actually start working for you, to discover a whole hidden side to their character. They're actually out for themselves. They're actually trying to get control over the company or whatever. Or they can't be criticized, or they're very fragile, etc. And they're a nightmare. And so you want to stop paying attention to what people say about themselves. You want to train yourself to not look at their charming, charismatic exterior, and instead judge them on some of the nonverbal cues that come up. But more importantly, look at the patterns of behavior. Look at things that have happened in the past. I often tell people that I consult with, even in the job interview process, you can inflict a little bit of stress on the person you're interviewing them. make them a little nervous, make them a little tense with kind of the direct questions you ask, and see how they respond. Do they get all defensive, etc.? And a very good thing to note is, can people say, actually, I don't know the answer to that. I'm not really prepared to answer. I'd have to think about it. That is a brilliant thing. That's gold right there, because that reveals that someone is capable of learning, that they're not so defensive, that they're not so insecure. And so how people act under stress reveals their true character, reveals the effective truth of who they are. And so this is the lesson that I've learned, most importantly from Machiavelli. Through that lens, I judge the news. For instance, one thing I forgot is I look at what Elon Musk is doing with Twitter, a classic example. What's he really up to? And at first it seems like it was a power move to take over Twitter. But if you just judge by the actions themselves, what it really is he's somebody that likes to create a lot of chaos and turmoil. That's sort of what motivates a lot of his behavior. It gives him a sense of control and power. So often what he's up to is not really about taking over a company. It's about exercising his influence to himself and to the world and creating a bit of chaos that he always likes to exploit. So I use this as a way to analyze people in the news, to analyze if I enter an office situation or a group, to see who really has power, who really has control, and to judge people for what's behind the facade that they present to the world, and what's the true nature of their character.